Well, listen, mice and I believe rats, according to this article, are, you don't know what they're up to when you turn your back. Listen to this. Listen to this piece of this article. This is from the New Yorker, guys, okay? They wrote it in New York. It's true. Okay. This is what he said. Now, Mr. Billing, he's an exterminator. Okay. Now and then, Mr. Billing takes on a big exterminating job. The city once hired him to quell the rats in Central Park and in the dumps on Rikers Island. For a hobby, he hides in food establishments at night and studies the feeding habits of rats. I'll swear to this, he says. One night, in the warehouse of a grocery chain, I saw some egg-stealing rats at work. They worked in pairs. A small rat would straddle an egg and clutch it in his 4 paws. When he got a good grip on it, he'd roll over on his back. Then a bigger rat would grab him by the tail and drag him across the floor to a hole in the baseboard, a hole leading to a burrow. The big rat would slowly back into the hole, pulling the small one and the one with the egg in after him. And this is another story he had to share. I'll swear to this also, he says. This place had a bad problem, and I was called in to study it. I hid in a room where there were some sides of beef hung on hooks, about 3 feet clear of the floor. Around 11 p.m., the rats started wriggling in. In 15 minutes, they were around 200 in the room. They began jumping for the beeves, but they couldn't reach them. Presently, they congregated under one beef and formed a sort of pyramid with their bodies. The pyramid was high enough for one rat to jump up on the beef. He gnawed it loose from the hook. It rumbled to the floor, and the 200 rats went to work on it.
Wow. I don't doubt it. I mean, like, somehow rats have made it. No one likes rats.
No
one likes rats. There's no one that likes them. And now, I mean, there's a couple of outliers of people out there that probably have pet rats, and there are definitely domesticated rats, like the same kind of mice I was buying. You could also buy rats like that. My sister used to raise rats. She had a bunch of aquariums with rats in them, and she said she was raising them for people to sell to people that own snakes. So she was making a little side money, but it couldn't have been very much. And my friend Joey Tomlinson, he was over at my house one time, and my sister lived next door, and we went over to her house, and she put one of these rats on him, on his shoulder. Now, they were just pet rats, but it was like enough that he never wanted to go back over there.
No. Well, it's interesting that you said no one likes rats, because check out what this guy wrote. This is the brown rat, which is ubiquitous in New York. The brown rat is an omnivorous scavenger, and it doesn't seem to care at all whether its food is fresh or spoiled. It will eat soap, oil paints, shoe leather, the bone of the bone-handled knife. It can go for days without food, and it can obtain sufficient water by licking condensed moisture off of metallic surfaces. All rats are vandals, but the brown is the most ruthless. It destroys far more than it actually consumes. Instead of completely eating a few potatoes, it takes a bite or two out of a dozen. It will methodically ruin all apples and pears in a grocery in a night, gnawing on a few of them and then cutting them at the others for seeds. In a big warehouse, it goes berserk. In a few hours, a herd will rip holes in hundreds of sacks of flour, grain, coffee, and other foodstuffs, spilling and fouling the contents and making the wholesale mess. It sometimes seems that only a deep hatred of the human race could cause the rat to be so destructive.
Wow.
That rats hate us. The feeling is mutual.
Well, yeah, I don't know if we ever actually talked about this before on the podcast.
I'm learning a lot about you on this podcast.
Well, no, me and you, this is a shared experience for me and you, but I don't know if we ever actually mentioned it on the podcast.
Oh.
But the problem is gone, so I feel comfortable talking about it.
Okay.
But in the spring and early summer, when we had strawberries, we had so many strawberries, and it was really great. And one day, I saw a rabbit come under this spot on the fence. And I thought, well, that's really cool. I like that this rabbit has this spot that he comes through under the fence because I like the rabbits. So we went out and we built this thing. We built, we did talk about this on the podcast, but we put a tree limb out there that was kind of bent in such a way that I could put it over that and it would keep that hole intact. And we put a little mulch out there and we planted a few different plants and just made this kind of like cool rabbit hole area. And the day we built it, I'm out there and I'm looking at it and I go, oh, there's a rabbit out there now. I go, that's awesome. I was like, but that rabbit's moving in a weird way. And as I got closer, I could tell in the middle of the day, it was a rat. There was a rat out there. And then I started to notice rats and either small rats or mice in our strawberry patch. So then we would go over there and look at the strawberries, and they were brown. The rats were brown, and there would be little pieces bitten off of every strawberry, so much so that we stopped eating the strawberries. They wouldn't just eat a whole strawberry. They would take a bite out of every one.
You had to have every one.
And I had to put out traps, put out the metal traps, and I caught 2 or 3. But then I thought, well, all I've ever seen is 2. And now I've caught 3, so I must have got them all. And then I saw another one day, middle of the day. So I didn't want to do it because I hate rat poison. I hate how I believe that it kills them. I used to sell rat poison as a pesticide salesman, but I was like, I gotta do it. I gotta put this rat poison out. And I did put some out, and I've not seen any in several months. So I feel confident they're gone.
Well, they must have made better rat poison since 1944 when this article was written, because according to this article, he said that poison doesn't even work and that the most effective rat traps are old-fashioned snap or break back ones and a thing called glue board. We swear by glue board, he says. It's simply a composition shingle smeared on one side with a thick, strong black glue.
Well, you know, in my dad's house, my dad lives on a farm, and he has a really old barn where he would keep a lot of feed and stuff for the cows and the horses. And you would open that barn door, and rats would go everywhere, and they were huge. I mean, they were so big that my dad had to nail the big rat traps to the floor because the rats would get trapped in the trap and run off with them.
Wow, yeah.
I mean, it was enough to come down on the rats and trap them, but they would run away with it. It wouldn't kill them. You know, and when we lived in the rat house, as we refer to it, this house built in the 1800s, there was a little spot under the stairwell where it was like a little closet where you could store things. And we looked in there one day and you could see rat droppings everywhere. But it was just like, oh, okay, they must have had rats here at one point. And then one day you saw a rat in the kitchen, right?
Yep.
So that's when we were like, all right, we gotta get rid of these. So I had seen in that closet that there was a lot of rat traps. So what I did was I just went for the big ones right away. And I put the big rat traps in there. And these rats could I guess they were doing what it says in that article. They would set those traps off, eat the food, and not get caught by them. So then I moved to the mouse traps. No. Actually, the big traps, they could eat the food off of the big traps without setting them off. And then the little traps, they seemed to set off and get away from. So I went for the glue traps. And one day, I set out the glue traps one night. Now, I put glue traps and glued them to a board. And I had, almost the whole floor covered with glue traps. And we went to bed. The next morning, we had to wake up very early and drive to Lowell, Arkansas to do comedy at the Grove, which is about a 7-hour drive, maybe more. So we had to get up very early. And we woke up early in the morning, and we could just hear this screaming. This is me and you. And we open that closet door, and there are 7 rats trapped in those glue traps. And I didn't know what to do because I hate rats, but I do not support the suffering of any animal, rat or no rat. I do not support suffering. So I was like, I must kill these rats. I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I must kill them. So I took like a shovel and picked them up, and I put them in a trash bag, and then I put that trash bag into another trash bag. And then I went out in the backyard, and I put that bag down on the ground, and I could hear, I should have gave a warning.
There's a trigger warning.
Warning here. So just
PETA will unsubscribe from this podcast. I'll tell you that much now.
But I'm stopping the suffering. That's what's important to note here. Imagine you're trapped to a glue trap, and then someone just throws you in a trash can in a hot Tennessee summer. You're just going to die that way? I don't think so. I took them out in those trash bags. I took them out in the backyard. I grabbed a what I call a cement block. Some people call it a cinder block. And I lifted it up above my head, and you could hear the screaming coming out of this bag. And I threw that block one time down on that trash bag, and all the noise stopped. And I did it a couple more times just to make sure they were dead. And then I threw it in the trash can, washed my hands. We got in the car and drove to Arkansas.